Imagine waking up one morning to find out your family's home, your sister's cherished property, was sold without her knowledge. Sounds insane, right? Well, that's exactly what happened. I stared at my phone in disbelief as notification after notification flashed on the screen. The deed had been transferred, and the once warm and welcoming home that held so many memories was now in the hands of an unknown buyer. And who was behind this travesty? Deborah, the infamous HOA enforcer who'd long made it her mission to control every inch of our community, had orchestrated the sale. I could still recall the shock in my sister's eyes when she discovered that the home she'd grown up in, a sanctuary of family gatherings, laughter, and legacy, was gone. The news spread like wildfire among our relatives and neighbors, igniting outrage and disbelief. It wasn't just a simple administrative error. It was a calculated, ruthless move by someone who believed she had the right to decide who could call her community home. In that moment, as I absorbed the enormity of the betrayal, a surge of determination washed over me. I couldn't allow Deborah's overreach to stand unchallenged. If she thought that using her authority to dismantle our family's history would go unpunished, she had another thing coming. I vowed that my sister's home, the symbol of our heritage and love, would not be lost without a fight. My revenge was going to be as bold and as unapologetic as the injustice itself, a response that would shake the very foundations of our community. As the dusk settled and the shock of the morning began to fade, I started plotting my counterattack. I began gathering evidence, contacting lawyers, and speaking with other neighbors who had quietly suffered under Deborah's tyrannical enforcement of HOA rules. The seeds of a community uprising were being sown, and I was determined to lead the charge. Deborah had underestimated us, underestimated the power of a family united and a community fed up with arbitrary control. Today, I would make sure that Deborah's actions would have consequences. Today, she would learn that when you mess with something that is sacred, the backlash can be explosive. And as I prepared to take my first step toward reclaiming what was rightfully ours, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Crescent Grove is a gated community famed for its immaculate homes, uniform lawns, and a homeowners association that enforces conformity with an iron fist. Every detail is regulated, from the exact hue of exterior paint to the smallest decorative flourish in the front yard. In this community, order isn't just appreciated, it's demanded, and any deviation is met with swift, often draconian, action. At the epicenter of this rigid regime is Deborah Marshall, known to everyone as HOA Deborah. In her late 50s, Deborah is a force of nature, always impeccably dressed in tailored suits, her stern gaze and clipboard a constant reminder of the rules that govern every resident's life. To her, Crescent Grove is a pristine canvas that must remain untouched by individual whim. She's the self-appointed guardian of that perfection, and she wields her power without hesitation. In stark contrast, my family's legacy in Crescent Grove is built on tradition, love, and a stubborn refusal to let bureaucratic rules erase our history. My sister, Caroline, grew up in the home that has been in our family for generations, a warm, inviting house that stands as a testament to the hard work and love of those who built it. It's a home where every room tells a story. Every creak in the wooden floors carries a memory. Caroline poured her heart into that home, turning it into a sanctuary for family gatherings, holiday celebrations, and quiet moments of reflection. I, too, have always valued freedom and individuality. While many of our neighbors strictly adhere to the HOA's prescribed norms, I believe that a home is more than just a structure. It's a living repository of memories and identity. Over the years, my family's home became a symbol of our legacy in Crescent Grove, a symbol that we thought was unassailable. But when Deborah, with all her bureaucratic authority, decided that Caroline's cherished home could be sold off without our consent, it wasn't just property that was being taken. It was our history, our love, and our future. Crescent Grove, with its polished facades and regulated beauty, may look perfect on the surface, but beneath that veneer, many residents harbored quiet resentment. They had grown tired of having their individuality suppressed and their rights trampled by an HOA that valued uniformity over community spirit. My family was no exception. Over time, whispers of dissent had grown louder, though most were too fearful to speak up. Caroline's loss was the spark that ignited a fire that promised to challenge the very foundations of Deborah's reign. My determination to reclaim what was rightfully ours wasn't just about revenge. It was about restoring a sense of justice in a community where a single enforcer's whims had too often dictated life for everyone else. I began reaching out to like-minded neighbors, gathering evidence of similar grievances, and uniting those who were fed up with arbitrary rules. The digital petitions and anonymous tips were a clear sign. The community was ready to stand up for its rights. With every piece of evidence I collected, my resolve grew stronger. I vowed to take back Caroline's home and send a message that no one, not even the formidable Deborah Marshall, could arbitrarily strip away our legacy. It was time for a reckoning, a bold stand for freedom, creativity, and the right to control our own destiny. The scandal broke one crisp winter morning. Caroline discovered the news as she sipped her tea, staring in disbelief at the legal documents that arrived with the Morning Post. A deed transfer that showed her family home had been sold to an unknown buyer. The documents were official, sealed, and stamped with the HOA's insignia. Panic turned to anger as Caroline called our parents, and soon our entire family was thrust into a state of shock. The home that had been the heart of our family for generations was suddenly gone, and we had no idea how or why it had been sold. I immediately began investigating. I reviewed every piece of correspondence, every minute detail of the HOA's records, and discovered that it all pointed back to one person, Deborah Marshall. It turned out that Deborah had taken it upon herself to restructure the community by liquidating properties that didn't meet her strict standards of uniformity. Caroline's home, with its unique architecture and vibrant personality, was an easy target for someone obsessed with conformity. The HOA had approved the sale without even consulting the homeowners, relying solely on Deborah's report that the property was non-compliant. The injustice was staggering. I combed through the security footage from our front gate and found disturbing evidence. On the night before the sale was finalized, a figure in a dark coat could be seen making subtle yet deliberate passes through our property. The timestamps matched perfectly with the HOA's internal logs. Every document, every clip pointed to a coordinated effort led by Deborah to dispossess us of our heritage. Fueled by anger and the need for retribution, I began planning my counterstrike. I reached out to a trusted network of legal experts, community activists, and neighbors who had quietly suffered under the arbitrary decisions of the HOA. Their collective stories, filled with fines, forced modifications, and personal losses, confirmed what I had long suspected. Deborah's power had grown unchecked, and her actions were eroding the very fabric of Crescent Grove. I spent days poring over property laws and HOA bylaws. I discovered, with both vindication and fury, that the sale of a home without the owner's consent was not only unethical, but also legally dubious. This was the leverage I needed. I decided that if Deborah thought she could sell my sister's home without our consent, then she would face the full force of the law and my personal brand of justice. I began drafting a legal challenge aimed at reversing the sale and reclaiming the property. Every word, every clause was meticulously prepared, backed by legal precedents and a clear statement of our rights. But legal action alone wouldn't be enough. I needed to make a statement, a public, undeniable declaration that Deborah's tyranny would not go unchallenged. I reached out to influential community members, organized secret meetings with supportive neighbors, and started a digital petition demanding that the HOA board rein in Deborah's overreach. The petition quickly gathered thousands of signatures, with residents expressing their outrage and solidarity. Hashtags like hashtag Save Our Home and hashtag No More Deborah began trending in our community forums. The tension escalated as I prepared to present my challenge at the next HOA board meeting. I knew that confronting Deborah directly would be perilous, but I also knew that silence would only embolden her further. I armed myself with digital evidence, expert legal opinions, and the unyielding support of a community tired of arbitrary control. The stage was set for a confrontation that would either restore our family's legacy or shatter our faith in the system entirely. Every night, as I reviewed the security footage and updated the digital petition, I felt the weight of our history pressing down on me. My sister's home was more than just bricks and mortar. It was the vessel of our family's memories and identity. And now, it was at risk of being erased by one woman's obsession with uniformity. I vowed that no matter the cost, I would fight to reclaim what was ours. The battle lines were drawn, and the community was ready for a revolution in Crescent Grove, a revolution that would challenge the very essence of what it meant to live freely and creatively. In the days following the revelation of the unauthorized sale, a firestorm of digital activism erupted throughout Crescent Grove. Social media channels lit up with posts, videos, and impassioned messages from residents outraged by Deborah Marshall's overreach. Hashtags such as hashtag Save Our Home, hashtag No More Deborah, and hashtag Property Rights began trending locally as the community united behind our cause. Neighbors, who had long been silenced by the threat of fines and punitive actions, began to share their own experiences of arbitrary enforcement, each story adding fuel to the growing movement for change. Local news outlets quickly picked up the story, sending reporters to Crescent Grove to capture the unfolding drama. Interviews with shocked homeowners, passionate activists, and even legal experts painted a vivid picture of a community pushed to its breaking point. This isn't just about one home, one reporter remarked on live television. It's about the right of every resident to have control over their property, free from the whims of a single overzealous enforcer. The narrative resonated deeply, and soon every news segment, every article, and every comment online echoed the same sentiment. Our community's freedom was under attack. Inside the HOA board, tensions began to boil over. Emergency meetings were convened in hushed, tension-filled rooms, and leaked minutes revealed bitter disputes among board members. Some longtime members, who had once supported Deborah's stringent enforcement, now questioned whether her actions were truly in the best interests of the community. "We must protect the rights of our homeowners," one board member was quoted as saying. Others, however, clung to the old guard, insisting that strict uniformity was essential to preserving property values. The internal conflict was palpable, and it became clear that the board was divided, and that the community's outcry was forcing a reckoning. I continued to build my digital dossier, posting updated security footage, expert legal analyses, and personal testimonies from neighbors who had witnessed Deborah's overreach. My online petition, which demanded that the HOA board reverse the unauthorized sale and hold Deborah accountable, quickly gathered tens of thousands of signatures. Every shared post, every hashtag, and every comment reinforced the message. Property rights and family legacies must be respected, and no one, not even an HOA enforcer, has the right to erase them. Deborah, for her part, found herself on the defensive. Social media videos of her angry outbursts and frantic phone calls circulated widely, but they only served to highlight her increasingly desperate attempts to justify her actions. In one hastily recorded video, she claimed that the sale was for the betterment of the community, a statement that was met with widespread ridicule and countered by countless comments of disbelief. The more she tried to spin the narrative, the more the digital evidence and community support painted a starkly different picture. As the pressure mounted, the HOA board announced a final public hearing, a watershed moment that would determine the future of property rights in Crescent Grove. In the days leading up to the hearing, I organized meetings with supportive neighbors, distributed flyers, and coordinated with local media to ensure that our collective voice would be heard. The atmosphere was electric, charged with a mixture of anger, hope, and a burning desire for justice. Every evening, as I reviewed the day's developments, I felt the weight of history pressing on me. My sister's home was more than just a structure. It was a symbol of our family's identity, and reclaiming it was a fight for everyone who believed in the sanctity of personal property. The digital momentum reached a fever pitch. Influential bloggers, local activists, and even some sympathetic board members began to speak out, calling for a complete overhaul of the HOA's policies. We cannot allow one person's personal vendetta to dictate the fate of an entire community, one respected legal expert stated in an online interview. The combined pressure from all sides made it clear. If the HOA board did not act, the entire fabric of Crescent Grove would be forever changed, and not for the better. By the time the day of the final hearing arrived, the stage was set for a dramatic showdown. The community center was packed with residents, many holding signs that read, "Our home, our right," and "No more arbitrary fines." The room buzzed with anticipation as everyone awaited the board's decision, a decision that would either restore our family's legacy and protect our rights or signal a defeat for individual freedom. The decisive moment came on a cool, crisp morning in a packed boardroom at the Crescent Grove Community Center. The room was filled with HOA officials, local law enforcement representatives, community leaders, and hundreds of determined residents, all gathered for the final public hearing that would decide the fate of our community's property rights. With unwavering resolve, Councilwoman Laura Evans stepped up to the podium, her eyes reflecting the collective determination of a community that had had enough. After a thorough review of all digital evidence, including security footage, detailed transaction records, and the heartfelt testimonies of our residents, we have reached an inescapable conclusion. Councilwoman Evans began, her voice resonating with authority. It is abundantly clear that the actions taken by Mrs. Deborah Marshall, who orchestrated the unauthorized sale of the family home, were not based on any legitimate concern for community welfare, but were driven by personal bias and a flagrant abuse of power. Our community's fundamental rights as homeowners must be upheld, and no one should have the authority to decide the fate of a cherished family legacy without our consent. A heavy silence fell over the room as Evans continued. Effective immediately, the HOA board will rescind the sale and all associated fines, and we will launch a full disciplinary review of the practices that allowed such a violation of property rights. Furthermore, we will implement new guidelines that protect every resident's right to control their own property. Today's decision is not merely about reversing an unauthorized transaction. It is a resounding declaration that Crescent Grove will stand for justice, fairness, and the preservation of our community's heritage. Her words were met with thunderous applause and a chorus of cheers from the assembled residents. At that moment, a respected community advocate, renowned for his staunch defense of private property, rose to speak. "Today, we stand united," he declared, his voice strong and impassioned. "No family should ever have their home taken away without their knowledge. Let this vote be the turning point, a clear signal that we will defend our property rights and ensure that no one, not even an HOA enforcer, can strip away our legacy without facing the consequences." His declaration was met with resounding approval, and the room vibrated with the energy of collective resolve. Following his address, a senior officer from the local property rights oversight office presented the final dossier, a meticulously compiled record of digital evidence, expert testimonies, and official documents that confirmed the unauthorized nature of the sale. The evidence was irrefutable. Not only was the sale carried out without the proper consent, but it also violated several key provisions of our community guidelines. The Internal Affairs Panel unanimously endorsed strict disciplinary measures against those responsible for this gross overreach, and the full report was scheduled for immediate public release. Councilwoman Evans concluded, "Let this resolution mark the dawn of a new era for Crescent Grove, a community where every resident's rights are respected and where public authority is exercised with transparency and fairness." Our vote today is a resounding declaration that we will not tolerate any violation of our cherished legacy. Together, we stand for justice, accountability, and the inalienable right to live in a community that honors our history and our freedom. Her final words, delivered with unwavering conviction, sealed the turning point in our battle for property rights and individual freedom. In that defining moment, as every face in the boardroom shone with determination and hope, the balance of power shifted irrevocably. The overwhelming digital evidence and the unified voice of the community forced the HOA board to take decisive action, a turning point that would forever reshape the governance of Crescent Grove. The days of arbitrary sales and personal vendettas were over, and a future built on respect for family legacies and individual rights was finally within our grasp. In the weeks that followed the historic vote, Crescent Grove underwent a remarkable transformation. News of the rescinded sale and sweeping reforms enacted by the HOA board spread rapidly through local media and on social networks, sparking fervent debates about property rights, community governance, and the sanctity of family heritage. Editorials in the local newspaper, bearing headlines such as "A New Dawn for Crescent Grove" and "Community United for Justice," celebrated the decisive actions taken to protect the rights of every homeowner. Hashtags like #PropertyRights, #SaveOurLegacy, and #NoMoreAbuse trended widely, reinforcing our collective determination to stand against any form of arbitrary overreach. Town hall meetings and community forums saw unprecedented attendance as residents gathered to share their own experiences and to envision a future where family legacies were preserved and individual freedoms were paramount. Neighbors, who had long been intimidated by the arbitrary actions of the HOA, now spoke proudly about their right to maintain their own properties. "Our homes are the heart of our history," one impassioned resident declared at a crowded meeting, his words resonating throughout the room. The atmosphere was one of hope and renewal, a promise that Crescent Grove would always honor the rights of its residents. Within the reformed HOA board and local oversight agencies, swift changes were implemented. Senior officials, led by Director James Carter and Lieutenant Marcus Reed, launched comprehensive training programs on ethical governance, cultural sensitivity, and the responsible management of community resources. Regular internal audits and transparent disciplinary processes were established to ensure that every complaint would be thoroughly investigated and that no resident would ever again suffer from arbitrary enforcement. Our duty is to protect the heritage and rights of every member of our community, Lieutenant Reed affirmed in a follow-up press conference, reinforcing our renewed commitment to justice and fairness. Community leaders and local civil rights organizations also mobilized to empower residents further. Workshops, public forums, and educational campaigns were organized to raise awareness about property rights and the importance of preserving our collective heritage. When we stand together, our voices are powerful enough to reshape our community, a local activist proclaimed at a town hall meeting, inspiring neighbors to unite in the fight for a more inclusive and respectful governance model. For me, the journey from confrontation to resolution was both deeply personal and profoundly transformative. My decision to stand up against Deborah Marshall's unauthorized sale of my sister's home and to fight for our family's legacy had not only reclaimed our rightful heritage, but it also ignited a broader movement for property rights throughout Crescent Grove. Neighbors who had once endured the tyranny of arbitrary decisions now found their voices and shared their own stories of injustice. The digital evidence that exposed Deborah's misdeeds became a rallying cry for every resident who believed that family history and individual freedom were non-negotiable. Deborah Marshall, once the formidable enforcer of the HOA's strict policies, was now reduced to a cautionary tale, a stark reminder that no one is above accountability when a community unites for justice. Her influence waned rapidly as digital records of her past transgressions circulated widely, underscoring the need for reform and the dangers of unchecked authority. At a final celebratory event held in the Central Park of Crescent Grove, residents, local officials, and community advocates gathered under the warm glow of the setting sun. A large banner reading, "Unity, Freedom, and Family Heritage," was unfurled between towering oak trees, and heartfelt speeches echoed with promises of a brighter, more inclusive future. Today, we celebrate our victory over arbitrary interference, a victory for every family, every homeowner, and every voice in our community, Councilwoman Evans proclaimed, her voice resolute and inspiring. The standing ovation that followed was a powerful affirmation of our collective commitment to protect our legacies and ensure that no one can abuse public power again. As each new day dawned over Crescent Grove, the legacy of that fateful confrontation endured as a beacon of transformative change. The story of how Deborah Marshall's unauthorized sale of my sister's home was exposed, and how my relentless pursuit of justice reclaimed our heritage, became a rallying cry for every resident who believed in the sanctity of family and the right to live freely. Every sunrise now carried with it the promise that in Crescent Grove, truth, justice, and the preservation of our heritage would forever prevail. In the end, what began as a personal battle evolved into a watershed moment for our entire community. We emerged more united, more vigilant, and more determined to safeguard our rights against any form of bureaucratic overreach. And as the sun rose each morning over our reclaimed neighborhood, it carried with it the promise that Crescent Grove would forever be a place where creativity, integrity, and respect for individual heritage were cherished above all else.